Welcome everybody to The Viewing Room, a new show on Troubadour Channel. I have Mark Pellegrino, Jax Schumamn, and Jennifer Bouani, and we are going to be discussing Fauda Season 1. So in this first segment, we're actually going to be talking about our first reactions, and then we're going to talk about the writing, the acting, and themes, cultural relevance, artistic elevation of the show. The goal is to help you get more out of your TV and movie viewing. Okay, welcome everybody to this new channel, Troubadour.
Yay.
Now,
Thanks.
Thanks.
just
Thanks
just
for
so
having us, Kirk.
you're welcome, and just so everybody who's watching knows, there was a show, and maybe in the future will be called TV Talk on the Ayn Rand Center UK, which you three did for how long did you do that show?
2 years.
2 years.
Couple years, yep.
Couple years, okay. And we're kind of hoping we can move this over to Troubadour Channel and do a regular show for everybody out there here. So let's hop into the actual discussion of your reactions. So let's go around the room and see. I don't want to give my reaction first, but I will if nobody else wants to go first. But Mark, would you be willing to go first with your reaction?
Sure. I just want to preface it though. There are some shows, movies, TV shows that you can see over and over and over again. And every time you see it, it becomes better. It's like an onion. You peel away every layer to find something new. The Big Lebowski is like that. Every time you watch The Big Lebowski, you find something new in it that makes you enthusiastic about viewing it. This show is the opposite for me. When I first saw it, it was an enthusiastic thumbs up. You'd think today, in the post-October 7th world, where a show like this is totally relevant, that my thumb would continue to stay in this direction. But the more I watch the show, the more my thumb begins to inch in the downward direction. So I would say now, I'm not completely a thumbs down, but I am a thumbs almost down.
Well, that'll be really fun to explore. I'm excited to dig into that a little bit as we go. Who would like to go next? Jax or
I'll
Jennifer?
go next.
Jax?
Yeah, I can go next. So I am like Mark, and so I've seen the show twice now. And I've definitely seen, well, seasons 1 and 2 I've seen twice, and then I watched seasons 3. Are there 3 or 4 seasons or
I think
5
there's supposed to be
seasons?
5.
Okay.
There's either
So
there is or there's about to be 5th season.
oh, that's right. Okay, so 5 seasons, and then there's about to be a 6th season. So I watched seasons 1 and 2 before October 7th. And then October 7th hit, and I started watching. That's kind of when I thought, guys, we need to do Fauda. And so I started watching Fauda again and watched season 1 and 2 all over again. And I am with Mark that while I heavily enjoyed it the first time, the first round before October 7th, I had different thoughts, and as well artistically I had some different thoughts about it. So I wouldn't say I'm like as close to Mark thumbs down. I'm like thumb mid, but maybe more like a little on the positive.
Thumb med. Keep them halfway alive is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
From the gladiator up and down. Keep them a little bit alive. Yeah, just cut off an arm or something. Okay, Jennifer, what did you think?
Okay, so this was I have not seen it before, and in fact, when Jack says, "Oh, after October 7th, we've got to watch Fauda," I started watching it. So I've only seen it once, and I saw it almost to the end of season 2. And I don't know why they don't like it, but I actually really did like it as a first timer, getting to see the this world at a very, very personal level. Like you've got the special forces undercover and their personal lives, and then you've got their enemies and their personal lives. And that was just a unique way of telling the story that I had never seen before. And so I appreciated being brought into that world and shown the messiness of it. So I give it a thumbs up, but
Okay.
that's as a newbie. What
Yeah,
about you, Kirk?
so I'm having trouble with it as well for a variety of so I had heard about it beforehand, actually from the Yaron Brooks show, and I have thought about watching it, but I never did. And then because of the show with you, and then I think also after October 7th, this became more prominent in my mind to definitely watch this. in watching it and learning a little bit about the background and the history of Israel and Palestine, I I did also have some problems with it. I definitely think from an, we could talk about this later. Artistically, I thought it was just a pretty straightforward thriller to me, which was fine. I like thrillers; it's good. But the challenge, I think, for all of us and for anybody watching is all the emotions that are integrated into the show itself because of the real world situation that's going on, which I think will have to talk about a little bit at some point during the show. So I joked around about the not lopping off of an arm mid-level, but I'm kind of there, probably leaning more toward the negative on it as well. But not because of any of the artistic elements. The problem I'm having is trying to suss those, like to pull those apart. What's the good in the show as art versus all this cultural baggage. And I'm thinking they're not doing enough in what I think is a valuable effort to show the world what's going on in Palestine and Israel, which is I think a separate issue.
Do you think we should give a very quick overview of this show for our listeners who have
Yeah.
not seen it?
Please.
I'm just going to kind of read from Wikipedia because I do better that way, but I'll sort of paraphrase, and Mark or Jennifer or Kirk jump in anytime. So it's an Israeli television series, and it follows a special unit of the Israeli Defense Forces called the Mitzah Avrin, and I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing it the wrong way. It was developed by Lior Raz and Avia Sharaf. And the interesting thing about Lior Raz stars also as our main hero, Doron. Lior Raz also happens to he was in the IDF as well. And in fact, after October 7th, rejoined the IDF to help rescue other Israeli soldiers, something that really interesting, and you don't see that from American actors. Well, because they're just not in the military, right? But in general, I think Elvis was.
World War II. A lot of them did go back to war, but yeah.
But to not to knock Lior down a little bit, everybody's in the IDF. The only way you're not in the IDF in Israel is if you're a religious fundamentalist, and then you get subsidized to read the Torah.
Yeah.
So I think he was actually in a wing that was very similar to the wing that is the subject of this today, which I want to talk about a little bit later, because there's aspects of some of the characters that take me right out of the imaginary circumstances for reasons I'll tell you about. So it was hard for me to believe that he was the real deal. Let's just put it that way.
Interesting. So just to kind of continue with the series overview really quick, so Lior Raz created it with Avi Ashraf. Avi Ashraf is also a journalist, an Israeli journalist who heavily reported and continues to report on Israel and Palestine. The premise of this is that Doron has retired. The character of Doron, played by Lior Raz, has retired from the special forces of the IDF and is brought back from retirement because he's done with it. And these are basically like SEALs or Army Rangers. They're a very specialized elite group. They go in undercover. There's kind of plausible deniability that they go in for special missions. And Doron is encouraged to come back because of a terrorist that his group was thought to have killed. And the terrorist is Tawfiq Hamad. There's news that he's still alive. This is a Hamas terrorist. So there's news that Tawfiq is alive, and the group decides to go in undercover to the wedding of Tawfiq's nephew or son. I think it's nephew.
It was brother.
Was it his brother?
His younger brother.
His brother.
Yeah.
His younger brother. Okay.
Bashir.
Bashir, right? So they're. And Amal is who he's marrying, right?
He's marrying Amal, I believe, in Bashir.
So they decide to go in, and to the wedding as undercover caterers, basically, so that they can take out Tawfiq. And Tawfiq doesn't show up until the very last minute. Things go sideways, and Bashir, the groom-to-be, is killed by Boaz, who is part of the Israeli unit. And there's all kinds of relationships that we can get into. There's brothers, there's, people sleeping with other people. It feels kind of very incestuous with like all the families and
Well, it was literal
especially with
incest at one point, but yeah.
That is, yeah, absolutely. So thus kind of, so the catering fiasco goes awry. They fail in getting to Feek. They shoot him, Duran shoots him, but he ends up surviving. And so thus kind of is the series or the season opener for the entire season 1. What I like about the show is that they have a big bad every season, and then they solve that, big bad in a certain way. So the entire season is about how do we get to Feek. His right-hand person, Walid, is a despicable character who we can go into later. But that's basically kind of it in a nutshell. And it tells the lives of these Israeli soldiers, their family lives, how being in the IDF, being in this special group affects everybody. So from that perspective, I think it is very interesting. And that's kind of the basic overview. Do you guys have anything else to add to that?
No, I think it's just a cat and mouse type of show, right? Where you have like you're saying, a terrorist, Abu Ahmed, who's out on the run. He killed 116 Israelis, including the elderly, children, women, and this force is trying to get them back. And Duran is the character who comes out of retirement, as you said, to basically. But the question is, why does he come out of retirement? A lot of it seems to be for revenge. And Fauda, by the way, means chaos. And so I think it's Arabic. I don't know if it's Hebrew
Arabic. It's what they shout. It's what the IDF shouts when they're in when shit's about to go down bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they shouted.
Are we allowed to swear
scene.
on this channel?
Yeah. Yeah, like when they're in the wedding sequence, they shout Fauda a couple times because Duran, of course, goes a little crazy and shoots the guy when they could have gotten away, right? So that's part, and I think that's part of like what springboards everything into this whole action sequence of trying to catch this person. And Jennifer, I would be curious because you seem to like it the most. And again, I do want to say that I enjoyed the watching of it. I don't want to say like I hated it and I was like miserable and pulling out my fingernails or something, but like I said, some of the problems I had were the way realism was used and I think the real life situation was problematic. But I'd love to hear more, Jennifer, about what you liked about it.
Well, I'd love to hear what was problematic about it, because I feel like this guy, Lior Raz, who played Duran, like he was in it. He was front seat to it. And then he stepped out of that world and went into the entertainment world and took his PTSD and also the fact that he had actually lost his girlfriend to a terrorist attack and that pain. And he turned it into something positive, a TV show that creates meaning around this. I mean, as a writer who likes to whose purpose is to find meaning in this life through storytelling, I'm almost envious, that he has these incredible experiences and that he's taken the time to do it and to bring it to us and yes, he did give a little he shows the other side, the enemy side, and the human side of it, the grieving mothers of the Hamas dudes. And but I think that's real. Like, I think that's what he experienced. And I see the problem with the eye for an eye principle that's like, over 3,000 years old. And why that, even if you're a civilized nation that promotes human life, how you can get sucked into it. Duran got sucked into it and it becomes this black hole. So to me, I loved that he brought the story. It was maybe I have a crush on him because he's just like so heroic in that he took these experiences and turned them into this. So that's what I like about it.
Well, I think that's a really important observation, though. Like in my view, when experiencing TV, film, anything with like a person there, I do think it's one of the challenges is trying to separate your own personal feelings from an evaluation of the, for a particular character or an actor. Because I think it's very easy to see an actor, be attracted to that actor, and then add in all this thing of like how valuable the show was when really you just found the actor or actress attractive. And that's really what it is. Now, the question is, I think, why is that actor attractive? Like, what is it about? Is it, or that character? Like, what is it? Is it his heroism? And then,
Well, let me be clear. It wasn't the actor that I'm saying. I mean, the character. It was the writer, is
that's
what
what
I'm
I mean.
saying.
Yeah. So that's,
Yeah.
that's even like an outside element from the art is part of what you're like more open to. I'd like to hear, Mark, some of your, some of your challenges with it, and then I could talk about some of mine. Then maybe we can move into
Well,
writing.
maybe we should talk about what I think is right about the show first, maybe
Okay.
a little more positive, and then get into things
Yeah.
that I had issues with, because I think it's a very interesting, compelling thing that Jennifer is very influenced by the guy's personal life, and what she says is in real life a very heroic thing, to
Yeah.
turn tragedy into art, and to then take that tragedy that would probably crush most people and make it meaningful, and then to make that meaningful subject matter something that influences other people is a wonderfully heroic thing. One of the things that I really like about the show is that it understands that a show isn't a show about anything, is essentially a show about the interactions of the people. Supernatural isn't a show about two guys that kill monsters. It's a show about family. And in the end, people love family dynamics. They love two orphan brothers who will go through literally hell to be together and to fight bad guys. And the people who come into the universe, including Lucifer, it's all familial relationships. And in this case, we get to see the personal dynamics of the people behind the scenes. We see what drives them. I think Daron is driven less by a sense of justice and not revenge, but more an adrenaline junkie who can't get enough of the rush of putting himself in dangerous situations. That is a complex element to a character that's very interesting to explore. And what I like, very similar to Jennifer, is that it shows how the special forces unit is a family unto itself. It's a unit that can only relate to one another, and the people on the outside aren't allowed in. They can't get in, and that creates a psychological dynamic between the people in the special forces and the people on the outside. That's a very interesting subject to explore. Not from a perspective, not explore as a scientist, but as a part of narrative. And we see how the kinds of what kinds of peril the individual characters are in, and how that affects the ones they love. We get to see another thing that I thought was interesting, was not seeing that the Palestinians have families too, and that they cry as well. I think that's a bit of a cliche. What I did see something that I thought I needed to see, which was that the Palestinian movement is an identity that permeates everything they do. And what I liked about some of the characters was that there's a clear conflict between the Palestinian identity and right and good and what's right for them as individuals. So there's a time when one character in particular, Ahmed's wife, is put in a dangerous position by making the choice of her son's life or her relationship to the Palestinian people and its cause. Let's not forget that when Bashir is killed, they drape him in a Palestinian flag. It's all about the movement. This was something that I think disturbed a reviewer from The Guardian, but which I found to be probably one of the more true elements in it. And one of the reasons why.
Was it a Palestinian flag or a Hamas flag, or is there a difference
Hamas.
between the two?
Was it Hamas? Well, yes. No, there is no difference between the two. It's not there is no difference between the two, since the Palestinian.
Well, I thought there were two different flags.
They are two different flags, but I hold them as one is the spiritual core of the other. One is a pan-Arabic, religiously fanatic group that animates the Palestinian movement. The whole concept of a state, Palestinian state, is grounded upon that spiritually. So
no, but my only point is that if they put him in a Hamas flag, they're very specifically propping him up as a shaheed, right? As a martyr.
Which they did. Yes, they prop him up as a martyr, which is, there's no difference in that realm of the movement from, you know, a state actor and a religious actor. They're one and the same, right? The reason why you're killed as an apostate is because is for the same reason you're killed here as a traitor to your state. At least they look at it the same way. So the national identity and the religious identity are fused, and I thought that was sort of interesting. Now the things that if you want to talk about some more positives, that's great. I'll start hinting at negatives later, but
well, I agree with your positives for sure. That was definitely my favorite part of the show, in the sense of getting an understanding of that world, and as realistic and real, you know, with realism in it, that the wives and the mothers in a very important way of the Palestinian Hamas, like the Panther or Ahmad's mother, she's really pushing him to do this. Like she's really, and so at some point, even as the wife is, even though they have conflicts with an injured daughter, and you see that in the conflicts of other characters who have injured daughters, and like, should I go to Israel even with the best doctors in the world, or I don't want a Jew to work on my daughter or my son? And that's an important part of the story of what's going on in this world. And then just all the little, even the side characters, the way that I think they honor the martyrs and the becoming a martyr, that they all, like, that's an important part of this world that I think a lot of us in America and in the West probably don't grasp when we think about, like you're saying, Mark, Hamas and Palestine. They're two separate things, completely different, maybe a little bit, but you know, there's a lot of like admiration on the streets for these people who are fighting fighting this war for them, in a sense, and they're giving the spiritual fuel to these martyrs, or these going to be martyrs, the shaheeds, I believe they call them, and that's an important part of it. So I agree that in terms of seeing that with your own eyes in very realistic sense with good writing in that realm, I think that's very valuable.
And also
probably my favorite part of the show.
And also seeing the impossible dilemmas that characters are put in, because, you know, because Ahmed is a mass murdering terrorist. His wife is put in a terrible position. Her family is put in a terrible position.
You mean Tafik? Which one is Ahmed?
Ahmed.
Tafik is his real name, I believe. I believe that's his. Yeah, but his name is
Abu Ahmed. Abu Ahmed.
Oh, that's his terrorist name. Okay.
Yeah.
Panther.
So
gotcha.
So the terrible position that it puts their family members in, not only because their significant other has declared war against an entire people and is a murderer, and they become complicitous in it by protecting him, but because the identity of the Palestinian people is so wrapped up in a fake liberation movement, you know, it's something fanatical and something dogmatic. They become, it puts them at odds with their own interests, as we see when she has to make the choice for her son and decides on real liberty, going to Germany and taking her son there to start a new life. That's a choice that's a true liberation movement within the fake liberation movement of Palestinianism. I think it's a good thing for people to see this dramatized, because you're right. Nobody in the West really understands the concept of a death culture. Nobody understands why somebody would seek death as a proper end to their life. If anything, we do our best we have a longevity movement in the West where we're trying to extend our lives as long as possible. And the idea that it's great to kill yourself and take as many other innocent people along with you as possible, as a moral virtue is something it's incomprehensible to us. And I think it's part of what feeds the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian movement, is they think they're just like us. And they're not. They're not.
And I think that there's a level of denial too, that they just can't accept. Most Western culture can't accept that there actually is an entire culture devoted to and that values death over everything else. which is, I think one of the more interesting aspects to me along the lines that you guys were talking about in terms of being able to kind of see what it's truly like to be, to kind of like going into Gaza and the West Bank and to really understand what the Palestinian culture is like. One of the more interesting characters to me, and she becomes more interesting over the seasons, is Nurit. She's the female, the only female in the IDF squad. And so all of the people in the IDF, in this group, in Doran's group, they all speak fluent Arabic as well, because they all have to be able to pass when they, as Arab, when they go into, or as a Palestinian, when they go into Gaza and the West Bank. And when they go into Gaza, they have to be undercover effectively. And Nurit, as a female, has to be, I don't know if they call it like she's not wearing a burqa, but like a hijab, right? So she has to cover her head.
I think it's hijab.
And she has to, because she's got to be able to speak with other females and go into places where only females are allowed. They send her in undercover to go and talk to the doctor that Doran befriends, who actually is the one who has patched up Ahmed, and the one who actually puts the bomb in Boaz, and brings. So that was interesting. But I think when Nurit goes into Gaza and undercover, you see this incredible difference between who she is in Israel and who she is in Tel Aviv versus who she is in Gaza, and the way that she has to act versus she's such a free character in general. She's a really, really interesting character, and she's having an affair with her boss, right? And all of these, she drinks, and but then she goes into Palestine, or she goes into Gaza, and she has to be completely repressed. And I think that the show, they might have done this on accident, because I think that they were trying to show how, it's a respectful culture toward women, for the most part, but I think it failed. I think it failed in that respect, because every time I saw her going into Gaza, I was like, oh, here she's putting on like her oppression clothes. You don't see that with men.
I watched Journeyman.tv, which was behind the scenes, and it showed some of they had Israeli women playing some of the women over on the West Bank side, because they couldn't get them, because they're not allowed. Actually, women over there are not allowed to act in these shows. So they were complaining about that, talking about how hot it was. They were just like, they were bitching about it. But yeah, so no, I don't think it was overlooked.
Doesn't look comfortable to me. Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt you, Jax.
No, I was done with what I was saying.
With that.
Yeah, Mark, she has something.
Well, I would just to sort of jump off on the different conceptual relationships of in the societies with respect to women. You see a very accomplished French-trained doctor, Shirin. You see how powerless she is in the face of Wadi, her cousin, who has an incestuous love for her. When she more or less gets trapped between the two wheels of power that are trying to find Abu Ahmed, and she becomes a person of interest for the terrorists, for Hamas, who want to potentially take her out as a collaborator. His way of saving her is to marry her. Now that the fact that is a legitimate means of saving somebody would be very alien to people from, I think, our culture, and perhaps isn't so much to that one, but certainly to see somebody as westernized as Shirin almost go down that rabbit hole, because she had really almost no choice in the matter, was a very interesting juxtaposition, especially when you see it with Nurit. But I do have to say that there are scenes with Nurit and with Doran that bothered me, and I could talk about that later, because that's part of my beef with the piece.
Well, so I didn't know if we had any thoughts about the act, or we'll talk about the acting in just a minute, but the writing, and specifically, or even just the way that the show is structured. And I'll just say, like, one of the things I was noticing was the even-sidedness of the whole situation. that they would often have female male characters in relationships, and the way that, on the Israeli side, the way that they were portrayed was often chaotic love affairs, lots of problems, cheating, things like that. And on the Palestine, Hamas side, you saw, even though the war is what, being in war is what caused separation, you saw more, I think, from the Panther Abu Ahmed's character of his love for his wife, and what there's a mutual loyalty to them that was almost superior to what you saw in some of the other Israel, which I thought was an interesting writing choice to make, like that lifestyle is more like tenable to at least a long-term marriage than what you see in the only marriage you see on the other side, which is, there's rife with the affairs. They don't love each other. Duran even gets pretty aggressive, where he's like almost hitting her at one point. Like he pushes her pretty hard, and he's very aggressive, I think in a negative way. And I just found that
Who does Duran do that to?
His wife. Oh yeah, he hits her at one point. Like
Gali.
he pushes her very
Oh.
hard in a way that's almost like in the second to last episode, where they're in the kitchen. He's like, "Do you want to be with me, or do you love me?" And
Oh, well, this is after he's found out that she's been having an affair with his teammate.
Yeah, and he had an affair at that point too, by the way. And not, again, my point is not, necessarily any specific action he took. I mean, I definitely don't agree you should do that particular action, even if you're mad at somebody. But it was just, to me, interesting that the wives and mothers seem so respected and treated well so my point is the even-sidedness was a little bit bothersome, but you guys are pointing out something to me that I agree with, which is they did include that Walid, I don't know how to pronounce the name, character,
Walid, yeah.
that incestuous part of it. So, where it's like, that is that negative thing of, that kind of machismo culture, I guess I'll call it, where you have to have a protector to have someone, or at least that's the perspective. Like you have to have someone.
But to your point,
strong.
Kirk, you're right. Even though they included that like incestuous part, Walid to me seemed like a character that was not, he's a non-typical, he's like especially bad. And the way that they portrayed it is that he was like kind of a non-typical example of how love relationships go in the, among the Hamas people, which I disagree with, right? Because on the one side, they're showing, on the Israeli side, everything is dysfunctional. It's, everybody's cheating on everybody else. I don't think that there actually, as I think about it, I don't think that there was a true like love functional relationship shown, at least in season 1. As you go through the series,
Boaz had a very
I was going to say Boaz.
a very
Boaz
wonderful
had
relationship.
with the woman that died, that Bashir's fiance killed in a suicide bombing.
Yeah.
And even Gabby, who often acts kind of, in some ways is a little bit of comic relief, even though he's a very serious character, but he often, jokes about how he's been married 4 times.
Yeah.
And
get married so you can
get
divorced already and live your life.
Right.
That's what he tells one of the characters at one point.
Right. Whereas the Hamas characters, the relationships, the women are devoted to their men. They love them. And that's really not accurate in that. I mean, that's how they have to be on the outside. But a lot of them don't have choices in terms of who they marry. They get married off.
It's a facade.
Well, it's definitely a writing choice, because they could portray different perspectives in Palestine, right?
I would say, I would say a stopped clock is right twice a day, and rigidly religious people, they have a set of values, and it just so happens that those values that they dogmatically stick to are marriage and the types of relationships that men and women have. They're very strictly adhered to. Not because they've thought them through necessarily, but because God told them to. So it just so happens that there's a kind of order and a clarity in that world that you would get, I think, equally from a Christian fanatic or a Jewish fanatic. And there's a part of
Mormons.
us, right, Mormons, and there's a part of us as objectivists who like clarity and principled behavior who would gravitate towards that, even though it's not precisely that. And with respect to the chaos, the Fauda on the other side of the fence, I'm reminded of Jack Nicholson's line in
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
no,
Chinatown.
The Shining. I'm just going to throw out stuff.
Yeah, Shining.
No. The Sorkin movie with Tom Cruise, A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
So I'll say that again.
Can't handle the truth.
Yes, I'm reminded of Jack Nicholson's line in A Few Good Men where he says, "You can't handle the truth." That touches on something that I think is a truth in the show, another positive point about it, which is a certain breed of man and or woman puts themselves in these kinds of situations. That's why I said Doran's engagement in this world seems to be less about a cause as it is with the people in Hamas, and more about adrenaline rush, something within him personally that needs to be satisfied that the rest of us can't necessarily relate to because we just aren't built that way. We're not built like Navy SEALs who need this kind of, they have something in them, a kind of aggression, a kind of flirtation with disaster and a desire to go into the darkness that we don't. Professional fighters have the same drive to go into that world that none of us would voluntarily choose if we could help it. So it's not surprising to me that people who are extremely functional in these high pressure situations are not functional in life, right? Actors who are probably some of the greatest, most genius folks you've seen on screen are dysfunctional in their lives, partly because the profession that they're in incentivizes and promotes certain behavior traits and certain ways of looking at the world and responding that are not what you would consider social or domestic values. And so it's very difficult for them to acclimate to society and what society needs when the time comes. So I thought that was a very good, you said it was an interesting story point. You had issues with it. I mean, I have issues with humanizing bad guys, as that's my take. But I think the chaos on the one side was a very character savvy way of presenting, all of the principles as flawed human beings, superior at what they do in this one respect, but that superiority causes blind spots in other areas. I remember Stella Adler, the great acting teacher, used to say, if you want to marry Romeo, don't get together with George Washington. I mean, one man has a particular focus that makes him excel in one area, but be a very terrible diplomat. The other enables him to be terrible in probably the romantic sphere, but a great statesman. We can't be all things to all people and all things to ourselves. So I thought that was a pretty realistic and interesting take.
What about you, Jennifer?
Well, I agree with Mark, and it would extend it to just that's what you get in a free society, where women are free to choose. You're going to get messy. You're going to get messy relationships. So that's maybe a trade-off, but a trade-off I'm willing to take.
Yeah.
So I appreciated the realism in that.
Yeah, because what is interesting about that is that they're not miserable in these, in these relationships that they're in. They are messy, but they eventually work them out. Duran, especially with his wife, it becomes messy because she's having an affair and then he was having an affair. But what you actually see over the series is that he and his wife end up having a much stronger bond together as co-parents to their children, and the love that they share between each other is really wonderful. There's a season when really, I think at the end of season 2, if have we all seen to the end of season 2?
I've only seen season 1.
I don't want to spoil it,
Don't spoil
but
it.
really terrible thing happens to Duran, and he withdraws. That's kind of his go-to, is he just completely withdraws. And it's his wife who, even though they're divorced now, his wife comes to his aid, and she's always there for him. She always comes to his aid. So in that way, because they have that freedom to divorce, right, she has the freedom to be with anybody that she wants. She comes back to him in a way where that their love has actually grown for each other in a more platonic, way, but it's very endearing.
Well, I also, maybe the last thing is, like, there's a moment when the Sheik, the season 1, when he tells Amal, your duty to your country and your cause is to have babies. So just, basically this is immediately after her fiance on their wedding day is murdered and lying right in front of her. And he's like, oh, it'll be okay. Your jihad is babies and having, and I just thought, like, I did like that they included that, because again, I think that's the pressure, and she didn't want to choose that. So she decided to die instead and have a suicide bomb. Now, I did want to make sure we covered some of the acting. So we've talked a little bit about the writing and like the show overall and our thoughts. And Mark, you had a comment about this two actor moment. Which one is?
It's not specifically a moment between the two of them. I don't know that they have many scenes alone together.
Who are the two?
Well, the one who plays Doron and the one who plays Narit have okay. So what happened is two scenes that are my pet peeve. All right, and I have a pet peeve. My pet peeve is if
Shocking.
you are. Wait a minute. What?
Where's that coming from?
Yeah. Where is that? That has like a whole.
No, I like it. I appreciate all of your
right
pet
peeves. There's backstory
Okay.
here.
Yeah, there is. I'm trying to sort out where and why.
Okay.
So if you are supposed to be a fighter, for example, as an actor, you have a responsibility. Now, you may not have the time to be able to do it 100%, but to look like a fighter. Daniel Day-Lewis, when he did The Boxer, had the luxury of studying boxing for 2 years. When he gets in the ring, he looks like a boxer because he really is. And you get the same thing from Marlon Brando and On the Waterfront. When you see him punching Johnny Friendly, he's punching like a boxer because he really was. Now, in the night of, one of the main characters was supposed to be a champion lightweight fighter, and he couldn't box to save his life. And it was very clear when he was hitting the bag that he was not a boxer at all.
We had a whole rant about that.
An amateur boxer, let alone a professional boxer and a champion level boxer. So when I see Narit, who's supposed to be a special forces, operative, hitting the bag like an amateur, I can't watch it. It immediately takes me out of the situation. And when I see Doron hitting the bag like an amateur, I can't watch it. It makes me feel like, and this is a guy who is supposedly the real deal. It makes me feel less like he is the real deal when I see that, because it's such a technical snafu. If you see a real professional hitting a bag, the difference is like night and day, and you can't in all good conscience as an actor or filmmaker show that fully. If you don't have the skill, you got to do what they do in Born Identity, lots of fast cuts, that it appears that you're actually doing something that you're probably not very proficient at, or not as proficient at as a real professional.
Which I found really interesting, though, because they are IDF. They do go through that training. Where was the Krav Maga? I wasn't really seeing that. They have that mandatory training. I felt the same way when I saw it. I forgave her more for it. I don't know why, but him being the leader, he's supposed to be the baddest ass. And yeah, I had that issue as well. But what was your other issue then, Mark?
But these are, it's not so much like everybody's IDF, but not everybody is a specialized soldier. That means these people do it professionally.
Right.
Everybody's drafted into the service for what?
Right, but Lior Raz was a specialized soldier.
Yes,
so why didn't he get that training?
Well, he might have. He might be very out of practice. I think Jennifer might have an answer for us. But my point is, if he's out of practice, have the self-perspective not to film it because somebody who knows a
Mm.
little bit about the striking arts even is going to be it's going to pull them out, I think, of the scenario.
We're making an assumption that the IDF has those skills, which I think is a good assumption. But when I was watching the Journeyman TV, they were there. The people that they were interviewing the real people. And the guy Leor Raz was talking about how um, they were doing some fight scenes and they were taking it from trying to make it as real as possible. So it's hard for me to believe that they were in that mindset
That's
without trying to make it
well,
as real as possible.
that's good PR. It just doesn't look right. So it's like, if you can't make it look right, cut it in a way that does make it look right. That's what I'm saying. I'm sure they wanted to make it as truthful as possible, but if you've seen, they used to have a show like Army Ranger versus Navy SEAL, Mossad versus, SAS soldier. And when you see a real Mossad guy disarm somebody, it's gnarly. And if you have it, and this is the situation that I'm talking about. The Mossad soldier, it wasn't choreographed. He didn't know what the other person was going to do in response, and yet it was a thing of beauty to see. Now you have the luxury of choreographing something. You have to make it pretty. You have to make it pretty.
His point was, in real life, it happens instantly. It's not cinematic.
Bullshit. He
said if you wait more than 10 seconds, you're dead.
It's irrelevant. What's
so
relevant?
They ended up stretching it out in order to
but it's
make
irrelevant.
It more dramatic.
In cinematic life, we need to see it beautiful. We need to see it beautiful. We need to see efficiency, because that's what these guys are supposed to represent. They have chaotic lives personally, but they're ultra efficient in their professional lives. Even if Duran's impulsiveness, which is another I think writing thing, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. It's a character flaw on his part, which also becomes something that's heroic. It's something that is part of his strength as well. His impulsiveness gets him into a lot of trouble, but it also, fills him with courage and enables him to, go that extra yard to get the job done. So look, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I just feel like physical confrontations have to be pretty. They're not in life, but they have to be pretty in
show. So one question I have, so we can, we talked a little bit about some acting, and I think that's interesting because when we think about acting, as a non-actor, I tend to just think about the delivery of the line, do they cry or not? Like, that's basically the level. And it's, hearing from a professional actor, it's true. Like, when you think about it, obviously you have to embody the whole thing and figure out how it's going to be portrayed on screen, which is an important part of the whole series, or any kind of acting that you're going to be doing, that you're as a embodying this character. So my questions, we talked about acting, we talked about writing, talked about our reactions. I do want to make sure we save some time for themes and overall culture. But one question I have for all of you in listening to this is, especially Mark, what you're talking about, is what's your view on realism in TV, so in cinema? Because what I agree with you 100%, Mark, in terms of, even if you're trying to go for realism, you should still be a stylized version in a sense. Like, I always think about John Wayne and early cowboy silent films. If you watch like action films, like cowboy films from like the 1920s, the silent era, when they have a bar room scene of fighting, it was chaos. It was absolute chaos, and you could not really tell what was going on. And one of the things that John Wayne did, and is like an actual change he made in his early career, was he wanted it to be more choreographed, so that the camera was more on him. He seemed like the hero. So I find John Wayne to be a very interesting person in doing that. But it's very choreographed, and there is some process involved, even if it's chaos and it's weird and whatever. Just watch McClintock when they're all like having fun. It's like a dance fight type thing. And so but this version in this show is all about realism. I think like they're really like, that seems to be a core thing that this show is trying to accomplish, is making the viewer see the quote unquote reality. Now we all know that it's not real. It's scripted. It's it's a version of reality that's stylized in a certain way. But Jennifer, you're saying like everything happens in a second. Mark, you're saying that still needs to be kind of shown out cinematically. So I wanted to get all your thoughts on the overall season one. As realism, was that good versus should they have done more in terms of stylizing it up, having more of a direct theme in that route? What do you guys think? Anybody?
I'll
Well,
let Mark go first since he's the actor, so he should comment on that first, I think.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about two different things in a way. I
Okay.
mean, all fight scenes are choreographed. So all fight scenes sort of fall into that realm of stylization. Right now, there are some who will choreograph it to look sloppy. Like for example, if you see GoldenEye, the first Bond movie that Pierce Brosnan did, I loved it because he fought like this SAS guy, and the final fight with him, I think, final fight with him and the villain in the end was this beautiful, compact Aikijitsu thing. And then maybe people complained, I don't know, but the very next movie he did, he fought like a drunken sailor. I wasn't as impressed by Bond because Bond is a 007. He's a very particular kind of agent. And I want to see him doing like Daniel Craig does, really elite shit that I can't do. And these guys aren't just IDF, they're elite soldiers that are trained to do these crazy things, to actually infiltrate enemy territory and engage them in a way that most people would never even think of. So as far as I'm concerned, the violence has to be, it wouldn't be this way in life, of course, but it has to be efficient.
So that's a pure efficient, you're saying.
It has to
like
look
that's so
yeah, no fight would happen like the Bourne Identity fights, where you see that awesome fight in the bedroom where he's using everything as a weapon and it's this crisp, clear, in Krav Maga craziness. And it puts you in awe. It's like, oh my God, this guy's a machine. He's crazy.
Yeah.
No fight would actually look like that in life, but it has to look that way in cinema. And that because I'm looking at Jason Bourne, who's an archetypal character, right? He's a big character, and he has to demonstrate that in some of his other actions. Now, but Jason Bourne is nonetheless acted realistically by Matt Damon, and the people in that movie are acting realistically, meaning they take the circumstances as true, and their acting is not stylized or put on. There's no artifice. They're just taking the situations as true. So for me, when I see good acting, I ask myself, is that person really doing something? Are they really engaged? Are they really solving a problem? Or are they pretending to? And it's because it's that level of engagement on the human level that you as an audience member actually relate to. You relate to the experience the other actor is having by going through the experience truthfully through the narrative. So, and there's very little an actor actually has to do, because you come to the event already suspending disbelief and already being quite accepting of what a person is going to do. So if something pulls you out of it, an artifice pulls you out of it, they have to do something extraordinarily bad, like hitting those bags, to pull you out of it. Now, if those two people were just normal guys that, who were reservists in the IDF, I wouldn't think anything of them hitting the bag like that. But they're special forces, so they can't hit the bag like that.
Okay, so Jennifer, Jax, any thoughts on the realism of the show, or no? It's okay if not.
I mean, definitely, I don't have thoughts about the acting and the fighting because these are two skills that I don't know anything about.
Well, I don't even mean the fighting and the acting. I mean, I
But-
think what they were trying to accomplish with the whole show was to give you, because one of the things I saw in the reviews, the most common word was an objective portrayal of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And that's even what Lior, the creator, and his partner were even saying they were trying to accomplish, was an even-sided, objective, realistic portrayal of what's going on with this war. So so yes, I think the fighting and all that's relevant in the style of realism.
I don't know that it's possible to be completely objective, and we all come with biases in this case, and including they admitted that they said it wasn't propaganda, and they were emphatic about that for the Zionist state, but they did realize that it was more pros their side,
Absolutely.
and they were okay with
Their
that.
side's right, but okay.
Well, their side is right, and you know what,
Like-
Jennifer, this is your first time this is your first time seeing the show, but my first time seeing the show, I didn't notice how pro-Israel it actually is, but it really is. I mean, when you really watch the scenes and the dynamics between the characters, it's almost it starts to verge on didactic in a couple of places, but it doesn't quite go there.
I mean,
Well,
It
the bad
does,
guys
Jax.
are so bad. Like Waleed is that on the second season. We aren't talking about the second season, but when he's being investigated or interrogated, he just gets evil. Like this face, he's pure evil.
well, maybe it went
So
more that way, but again, in season, we need to stick with season one. The question is,
yeah,
what's going on there? So I definitely, and Jax, I want to move to you so we can, because I know you had something to say, but I definitely saw like, okay, yes, they were terribly bad and irredeemable when they bombed the nightclub. I thought that was really good, like good, as a portrayal of their evil, where there's just no redeeming qualities to those individuals
and
who
blew up
do those.
Boaz.
Yeah, like, and putting well, the thing that with Boaz though is, again, if you look at it from an outside perspective, is, well, he is a fighter, so he's part of this world in a sense. Now, I don't agree with that philosophy, but that's, I think, how a lot of people think about this thing. But I think
They
with the
sewed a bomb
nightclub,
in him.
I know, yeah.
It's horrible.
It is horrible. The whole thing is horrible. War is horrible.
Yeah, that's a
Like,
disclaimer that you have to sign when you're in the special IDF forces. Is you may be kidnapped and have a bomb planted in you.
yeah. I don't. But Jax, did you have something to say?
Yeah, so I guess two comments. One about the realism. I do agree with what Mark was saying, especially on a fight scene is a good way, is a good example, but I think it applies to all the different all of the different types of scenes. I think that it has to be cinematic. It has to be a famous great philosopher, once defined art as the selective recreation of reality. Selective recreation of reality. That's why it's important to choreograph those fight scenes. That's why it's important to have that dramatic dialogue, right? I mean, the types of you do want to write things in a stylized way. You don't want it to be so stylized that you can't relate to it. But again, we think of in examples like Billions, the way that Chuck's character speaks is very Shakespearean. We talked about that in an earlier episode of TV Talk. That's probably not the way somebody would talk regularly, but it was so stylized and so well done that's the dramatic part of it, that you're brought into it. That's why we do art. That's why we do drama. We do things in a way that don't exactly happen in the real world in order to describe and in order to show what actual reality is. I will say that in terms of showing the negative aspect of Palestine versus the negative aspect of Israel, one of the things I did not like, and I have a really, really hard time with, I wonder what you guys think about this, is when Lior's character Doron takes captive Tafik's daughter and straps a bomb to her. Remember this in season one? Straps a bomb to her because they want Boaz back, takes a child, straps a bomb to her, threatens to blow her up, and then doesn't blow her up, but she
loses an eye.
Blast happens, and this is when Boaz gets blown
Who
up.
launched the blast though?
It was Tafik. It was Hamas.
And he was aware.
So
he was aware of that his daughter was there. He was informed his daughter was there.
Oh yes,
and he
knew.
blew up Boaz anyway. And I think,
which was the breaking point for his wife too. So I mean,
that's when
You see how utterly devoted to the cause they are and what kind of man it takes to fight somebody like that. It's Jax, you, me, Kirk, Jennifer, could we strap a bomb to a child and send them out there and threaten to blow them up and really mean it? I don't think so. But somebody, thank God, can, because look at what he was fighting. He fought somebody who did not care. It's not that he didn't care. He thought that the sacrifice was worth it.
Yeah, I think that's so. When we talk about like the themes, we can end here with talking about themes, cultural impact of the show. One of the things that came to my mind when I was watching the show was the poetic epic Iliad, which famously actually portrays the Trojans, the enemies of the Greek, as humanistic. Actually, they're often thought of as more human when you read the Iliad than the actual heroes of the poetry, which was the Greeks. Hector famously has a scene with his son and wife that's very pitiful in the Greek sense, like very bringing up emotions of pity for this person and what's happening. And so it's a very ancient technique, actually, because this is a Greek Homer writing this about Trojans who they sacked and killed everybody there. And so I thought when I was watching this, that's kind of what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the Iliad, which is one of my favorite stories of all time, and the kind of that portrayal of the whole thing. Because what I started seeing the theme of Fauda, which is chaos again, is the chaos that war brings into every single person inhabitants' lives. That's what I saw as a dominant theme. Is it in every side, on all areas? It brings out the worst in people. It's obviously bringing, and it shows this in somewhat stylized detail in terms of, I would put it as like love and war are two dominant things, because the way that each of the characters have chaos manifest is actually more with their love relationships. Like that seems to be how that is portrayed over and over and over again, versus any other way. I mean, you have it a little bit with the mother of Abu Ahmed, but you don't really, you have a little bit with the brother-in-law, but I guess you could also add family in there. But I think love relationships are the more intense part of the show, where you have multiple love relationships that are all going awry and they're all bad in a sense of, having chaos come from it, all caused by, of course, war. And then, as Mark's pointing out, the important element of what it does to your soul and the kind of person that it brings out of, like the True Detective line where he says, the world needs bad men. And there's a kind of thing where you guys are pointing this out about the strapping a bomb to a child. And this is why it was difficult for me to watch this post October 7th, and why I had a little bit more of a negative view of it, is because to me, what's needed in art is the clarity of showing the wonder of Israel and the rightness of what they're doing. There's a line in Fauda where they literally say Abu Ahmed is planning the next 9/11 in Israel. And of course, that's what they have called October 7th, is the 9/11 for Israel, in a sense. And I thought, again, to me, it was the even-sidedness that he was trying to go for is just not appropriate culturally to me at this moment. That's the part I had a difficulty with, is I want to see, I don't want to see paper figures of these villains. That's right. One of the good things about, you don't want to see the
mustache twirling villains.
Yeah, I don't want to see that. I want to see the depth of their belief, which I liked, seeing the depth of their belief. But I definitely don't at this point, I just have a problem with the sympathizing, because they are so evil. Or at least they should emphasize the evil more. They had it there, but I'd want to see it more emphasized, and more the value and the morality and the good of the Israeli side. Now that's just what I want to see. This is why I was saying it's difficult for me to see this after October 7th, learning a little bit about the history of this world that I have been over the last couple of months. And that was my part. I do think that thematically it landed in that sense of delivering on the chaos of war and what it leads to our individual lives. So why don't we do all concluding thoughts? If you have any last thoughts, I'd love to hear it from everybody before we wrap up.
I'll
Yes.
tag on to yours, Kirk. I completely agree. That was why my second viewing of Fauda was different, because it was after October 7th. And at the end of the day, and I've seen all the seasons that exist, at the end of the day, you still kind of have a sense of, well, yeah, I mean, definitely Israel, they're the more positive and they're the ones that are more on the right, but it wasn't definitive enough. It's not like it's not like a World War II show where like Band of Brothers, or what was the other one, like Saving Private Ryan. It wasn't like a very obvious, Nazis bad. And I didn't get that sense from, I felt like it was too even-handed and in a disingenuous kind of way. They were showing the Palestinian plight too altruistically. And that actually, I think, is a fundamental internal conflict with Israel in general, is their level of altruism and their they meant for Doron to be, when he strapped a bomb to that little girl, they meant for people to cringe at that, right? Rather than the way that Mark just reacted to it, which was, who's got the guts to do that in light of what they're facing, what they're challenged by. So I had that same issue, that they weren't showing, and I agree exactly that you shouldn't do paper tigers and mustache twirling villains, but there's a way to show like definitively right versus wrong. And I don't think that they nailed it on that. I'm going to be very interested, however, in what the next season of Fauda does, because all the 5 seasons of Fauda were filmed prior to October 7th. So I'm going to be real interested to see what they do in the last season.
And that's kind of my point, is give them a chance. This was before October 7th when they wrote and filmed this. And I got from it that they took if you take the journey and the arc of the main character, Duran, I got this sense that the theme was not just about war, but about this principle, this age-old principle of an eye for an eye, and how irrational it is, and yet at the same time how you can get sucked into it. Here's this main character getting sucked into it and seeking revenge, and not being any better than that. And that's a warning to humanity, I think. And I respect them for putting that out there. But I do think we should, what is season 4 or 5 or whatever the next one is coming out, what are they going to say? Maybe they will be more hone in on the philosophical differences, let's hope, of the two civilizations, martyrdom versus respect for human life. We'll see.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, so much to deal with there. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to address something that I think Jax was talking about, with a sort of moral equivalence, by Duran strapping the bomb onto Abu's daughter. It just, to me, highlights the fact that what McConaughey says in True Detective, and what Jack Nicholson says in A Few Good Men, is that you think it's horrible until you see that the terrorist is undaunted by it and will continue to go through anyway. That he's animated by something that doesn't have to do with life and death, or with personal values or personal gain, or he doesn't value anything in the world. And Duran is appealing to that value in the world that the other person abjectly rejects. And so, to me, that highlights lots of things that I could put in the box of that's very good and heroic and very interesting, not so much a moral equivalence, even though other people might not think that. I as much as I would agree with you, Kirk, that we need to see the heroes as heroes, we need to see the bad guys as bad guys without making them caricatures. It's hard for me to believe that people would buy it today. I
Mhm.
mean, audiences are far more sophisticated today. If you see a Twilight Zone today, 1962, people had a very different, much more simplistic grasp of the world, not to put people down in 1962, but if you see the stories today, they don't necessarily translate,
Mhm.
into our present time. They just don't have the complexity of character that we like to see. Because even though we like to see people, at least I like to see people rising above, their own internal obstacles and the obstacles that the world puts in front of them. I also like to see complex people, right? I like to see them struggling with, that's part of the struggle, part of the overcoming is their own internal obstacles. Like Hank, that's why Hank Rearden is one of the more interesting characters in Ayn Rand's story, because he has an internal obstacle to overcome in addition to an external one. I think the cultural relevance of this, believe it or not, I'm going to sort of come down on the other side. I think the pro-Palestinian movement has avatars of Palestinians in their heads.
Mhm.
It's an artificial group of people that they've endowed with, a special place on the hierarchy of oppression, and that they feel deserves justice. It's a fake movement, and what you see in this world is fanatics who have a whole community of people enthralled, some of whom don't want to get out of that lane because they're afraid of censure or violence, and some who just buy it, some who just animated by the dogma. And I think people will, even though there's aspects of the Palestinian world in this show that we can have some sympathy. We can have sympathy for a mother who loses her child. We could have sympathy for a broken marriage, or somebody not being able to see her husband, or and being caught between social acceptance and doing something for her son. All of these things are very human things that we can relate to. I think it will do more to puncture the avatar image of Palestinians than us talking on Twitter even about what the real issues are. It's concretizing a real problem that's out there, and I think now more than ever people need to see it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think I've have a lot to contemplate, and maybe watching the rest of Fauda is worthwhile for me. And so I appreciate everyone's thoughts on this on the viewing room, and I hope that all of the audience gets something out of this. And if you haven't seen Fauda, well, you've just seen it because we've talked about pretty much every episode, but hopefully that's still worthwhile for
Oh,
you
yeah,
to continue.
spoiler alert.
Yeah, I'll put that in the description. Definitely. This show's definitely going to have spoilers. There's no way to talk in depth about a show without spoilers. So,
For sure.
okay, that's our first episode of the viewing room. And thank you, audience, for hanging out with us. Please leave us your comments, subscribe, like the channel, and we will plan to do a lot more of these types of episodes. So, Mark, Jax, Jennifer, thank you so much, and thank you, everybody.